The sun beat down on the valley of Elah. It was a place of dust and ancient stones. Two armies faced each other. On one side stood the Philistines. They were strong, they were confident, their champions were many. On the other side stood the Israelites. They were filled with doubt. Their king, Saul, was tall, but even his height could not hide his worry. For 40 days, a shadow had stretched over their camp. This shadow was more than just the absence of light. It was the presence of a deep, unsettling fear that gripped every soldier's heart. The valley was a natural theatre for war. Hills rose on either side. The armies were camped on these opposing slopes. Below them, the ground was open. It was perfect for a decisive battle. Yet no battle was fought. Instead, there was a daily ritual, a ritual of intimidation. The Philistines had a secret weapon, or rather a very large, very visible weapon. He was the reason for the stalemate. He was the source of Israel's paralysis. Every morning and every evening he would emerge, his voice booming across the valley, his challenge echoing off the hillsides. The Israelite soldiers would listen, they would tremble. None dared to answer the challenge. Their courage had withered. It was like a plant without water. Day after day, the routine was the same. The challenge, the silence, the growing despair. The Philistine army grew bolder. Their laughter could be heard. The Israelite army shrank. Their shame was a heavy cloak. This was not just a military confrontation, it was a psychological war. And the Philistines were winning without a single sword being truly drawn in mass combat. The air itself seemed thick with tension. The land waited. The streams trickled by, indifferent to the human drama. But for the men in the camps, every rustle of wind, every distant sound was a reminder of their precarious position. They were trapped by their fear, trapped by the sight of their enemy's champion. The challenge wasn't just to fight, it was to overcome the overwhelming sense of dread that had become their constant companion. The days dragged on, each one a repeat of the last, a slow erosion of hope in the heart of Israel. From the Philistine ranks came their champion. His name was Goliath of Gath. He was not just a soldier, he was a spectacle. He was a giant. He stood over 9 feet tall. Imagine looking up at such a man. His height alone was a weapon. It made ordinary men feel small, it made them feel weak. His very presence was designed to break the spirit of his foes before any physical contest began. He was a walking, talking instrument of fear, a symbol of Philistine might and a stark contrast to any warrior Israel could field. Goliath was covered in bronze. His helmet gleamed in the sun. His coat of mail was incredibly heavy. It weighed more than a man. He carried a bronze javelin slung between his shoulders. The shaft of his spear was like a weaver's beam. Its iron point alone was a fearsome thing. A shield-bearer walked before him. This was not just protection. It was part of the show. It emphasized his importance, his power. Goliath was a war machine, perfectly engineered for the warfare of his time, or so it seemed to everyone who gazed upon him. Every morning and every evening, Goliath would stride out. He would stand between the armies. His voice was a roar. "Why do you come out and line up for battle?" he would shout. "Am I not a Philistine? And are you not the servants of Saul? Choose a man and have him come down to me." His words were like stones thrown at the Israelites. They were insults. They were a dare. He was mocking their God. He was mocking their king. He was mocking their courage or their profound lack of it. His challenge was specific. "If he is able to fight and kill me, we will become your subjects. But if I overcome him and kill him, you will become our subjects and serve us." This was champion warfare, one man to decide the fate of two nations. It sounded like a fair offer, but it was not fair. Not when the champion was Goliath, not when he seemed utterly unbeatable. The Israelites saw him, heard him, and their hearts melted. He was the embodiment of their deepest fears, a physical manifestation of impossible odds. Far from the terrifying front lines, in the quiet fields near Bethlehem, a young man named David tended his father's sheep. He was the youngest of Jesse's 8 sons. His older brothers were soldiers. They were with King Saul in the valley of Elah. David was not a warrior. He was a shepherd. He knew the ways of animals. He knew the paths of the wilderness. He knew how to protect his flock from lions and bears. His world was one of pastures and psalms, not of battlefields and bronze armor. He was, by all accounts, an unlikely candidate for heroism. One day Jesse called for David. He told him to take food to his brothers. He also told him to bring back news. How were his brothers? How was the war going? So David rose early. He left his sheep with another shepherd. He journeyed to the camp. He arrived just as the army was going out to its battle positions. He heard the war cry. He saw the soldiers. And then he saw Goliath. He heard the giant's defiant shouts, the same taunts that had paralyzed Israel for 40 long days. David listened to Goliath's words. He saw the fear in the Israelite soldiers. They ran from Goliath. They were terrified. This was not what David expected. He was young. Perhaps he was naive. But he saw something else. He saw an insult to his people. He saw an insult to his God. While seasoned warriors quaked, something different stirred in David. It was not fear. It was a righteous anger, a sense of injustice. Why was this uncircumcised Philistine allowed to defy the armies of the living God? His brothers saw him. They were not pleased. Eliab, his eldest brother, was angry. "Why have you come down here?" he asked. "And with whom did you leave those few sheep in the wilderness?" Eliab accused David of conceit. He said David only came to watch the battle. He dismissed him as a boy out of his depth. But David was not deterred by his brother's scorn. His mind was already working. He was processing the scene. He was assessing the giant. He was not looking at Goliath the way the other Israelites did. He saw something they missed. David began to ask questions. He talked to the soldiers around him. "What will be done for the man who kills this Philistine and removes this disgrace from Israel?" he inquired. He wanted to understand the stakes. He wanted to know the reward. But more than that, he was gauging the situation. He was testing the waters. His questions were not just idle curiosity. They were the first signs of a mind considering the impossible. He was already framing Goliath's challenge not as an unbeatable threat, but as an opportunity for someone to step forward. The soldiers told him about the king's promise, great wealth, the king's daughter in marriage, exemption from taxes for his family. These were significant rewards. But David's focus seemed to be elsewhere. He kept repeating, "Who is this uncircumcised Philistine that he should defy the armies of the living God?" This phrase was key. For David, this was not just a military contest, it was a spiritual one. Goliath was not just insulting Israel, he was insulting God. And that, in David's eyes, was an entirely different matter, a line that could not be crossed. His words reached King Saul. Someone reported what David was saying. Saul sent for him. Imagine the scene. The shepherd boy, youthful and ruddy, standing before the tall, worried king. Saul was desperate. He had watched his army's morale crumble. He had heard Goliath's taunts day after day. And now this young man was speaking with a strange kind of confidence, a confidence that no one else in the camp possessed. What could this boy possibly offer against the giant who terrified seasoned warriors? David spoke to Saul. His words were direct. They were fearless. "Let no one lose heart on account of this Philistine," David declared. "Your servant will go and fight him." Think about the audacity. A shepherd, untried in war, offering to face the 9-foot champion. Saul must have been astonished. Perhaps he saw a glimmer of hope, or perhaps he saw only youthful folly. But David was not speaking from a place of arrogance. He was speaking from a place of deep conviction, a conviction born from his experiences in the wilderness. Section 5. Facing a king, a different kind of strength. King Saul looked at David. He saw a youth. He saw inexperience. "You are not able to go out against this Philistine and fight him," Saul said. "You are only a young man, and he has been a warrior from his youth." Saul's assessment was logical. It was based on conventional wisdom. Goliath was a seasoned professional. David was an amateur. In any normal calculation of military prowess, David stood no chance. The king was trying to protect the boy, and perhaps protect Israel from further embarrassment. But David had a different kind of resume. His battlefield was the wilderness. His enemies were not men in armor, but predators. "Your servant has been keeping his father's sheep," David explained. "When a lion or a bear came and carried off a sheep from the flock, I went after it, struck it and rescued the sheep from its mouth." This was not boasting. This was a statement of fact. He described how he would kill the lion or the bear if it turned on him. He had faced death. He had prevailed. David then made a crucial connection. The Lord who rescued me from the paw of the lion and the paw of the bear will rescue me from the hand of this Philistine. This was the heart of David's courage. It was not self-confidence, it was God-confidence. He saw Goliath not as an unbeatable giant, but as another wild beast threatening God's flock, Israel. His past victories were not his own doing, but God's. And if God was with him against lions and bears, why not against this Philistine? Saul listened. Perhaps he was moved by David's faith. Perhaps he was simply out of options. What else could he do? No one else would fight. So he relented. "Go," Saul said, "and the Lord be with you." It was a hesitant blessing. It was a desperate gamble. But it was a chance. The king, the leader of the nation, was placing the fate of his people in the hands of a shepherd boy. This was a remarkable moment, a turning point. The conventional path had failed. It was time for the unconventional. Section 6. The rejection of conventional armor. King Saul then tried to equip David for battle in the traditional way. He dressed David in his own tunic. He put a coat of armor on him. He placed a bronze helmet on David's head. Saul was trying to give David every possible advantage, or at least what he perceived to be advantages. This was how warriors fought. This was what was expected. Armor protected you. A sword was your weapon. This was the established method of combat, the accepted script for warriors facing each other. David fastened on Saul's sword over the tunic and armor. He tried to walk. He was not used to it. The armor was heavy. It was cumbersome. It was not his own. It did not fit his style. It did not fit his spirit. He felt awkward. He felt restricted. This was not how he had fought lions and bears. This was not how he would fight Goliath. He knew instinctively that this was wrong for him. Wearing Saul's armor would mean fighting Saul's fight, not his own. "I cannot go in these," David said to Saul, "because I am not used to them." So he took them off. Imagine the surprise of the onlookers. The king offers his own royal armor, a sign of favor, a tool for survival. And the boy refuses. This was a bold move. It was a rejection of the standard way of doing things. It showed that David understood his own strengths, and he understood that those strengths were different from what the world expected. He would not fight Goliath on Goliath's terms. Instead, David chose his own weapons. He took his shepherd's staff in his hand. He went to the stream. He chose 5 smooth stones. He put them in the pouch of his shepherd's bag. With his sling in his hand, he approached the Philistine. This was his arsenal, simple, unassuming, almost laughably inadequate in the eyes of a warrior culture. A stick, a sling, and 5 stones, against a giant clad in bronze, armed with a spear like a weaver's beam. The contrast could not have been more stark. Section 7, the battlefield, a giant's taunt, a youth's faith. Goliath saw David approaching. He looked him up and down. He saw a boy, ruddy and handsome, not a fearsome warrior, not a worthy opponent. Goliath was insulted. He felt disrespected. "Am I a dog," he roared, "that you come at me with sticks?" The giant was accustomed to facing armoured soldiers, men who at least looked the part of a challenger. David, with his shepherd's staff and sling, seemed like a joke, an affront to Goliath's status as a champion. The Philistine cursed David by his gods. He issued a terrifying threat. "Come here," he boomed, "and I'll give your flesh to the birds and the wild animals." This was psychological warfare at its most brutal. Goliath was trying to crush David's spirit before the fight even began. He was using his voice, his size, his reputation to intimidate. For any ordinary person, these words, coming from such a monstrous figure, would have been enough to cause them to flee in terror. But David was not ordinary. He did not flinch. He did not waver. He had an answer for Goliath, an answer that came from a different source of strength. "You come against me with sword and spear and javelin," David called back, his voice clear and strong. "But I come against you in the name of the Lord Almighty, the God of the armies of Israel, whom you have defied." David was reframing the battle. It wasn't about David versus Goliath, it was about God versus Goliath's defiance. David continued, his words filled with unwavering faith. "This day the Lord will deliver you into my hands, and I'll strike you down and cut off your head." He declared that the whole world would know there is a God in Israel. And everyone gathered there would know it is not by sword or spear that the Lord saves. For the battle is the Lord's, David proclaimed, and he will give all of you into our hands. He was not just predicting his own victory, he was declaring God's power. Section 8. One smooth stone, the unthinkable victory. As Goliath moved closer to attack, David ran quickly towards the battle line to meet him. There was no hesitation in David. He did not wait for the giant to dictate the encounter. He seized the initiative. His speed and agility were unexpected. Giants are strong but often slow. David was using his own advantages. He was not trying to be a smaller version of Goliath. He was being David the swift shepherd, accustomed to quick action and precise movements. Reaching into his bag, David took out a stone. He slung it with all his might. The sling was not a child's toy. In skilled hands, it was a deadly weapon. Shepherds used it to protect their flocks from predators at a distance. It required precision. It required power. David had honed this skill over years in the wilderness. That single stone, chosen carefully from the stream bed, became a missile guided by practice and by faith. It flew through the air, silent and true. The stone struck Goliath on the forehead. It sank into his forehead. The giant, the unbeatable champion, the mountain of a man, stumbled. He fell face down on the ground. The sound of his fall must have echoed through the valley. Silence, then shock. The Philistine army, so confident moments before, watched in disbelief. Their champion was down, defeated by a boy with a sling. The impossible had happened. The invincible had been vanquished. It was a moment that changed everything. David ran and stood over Goliath. The giant had no sword of his own, so David drew Goliath's own sword from its sheath. He killed him and cut off his head. When the Philistines saw that their hero was dead, they turned and ran. The Israelites shouted and surged forward. They pursued the Philistines. The fear that had gripped them for 40 days was broken. The victory was total. And it all began with one shepherd boy, one sling, and one smooth stone. Section 9. The Giant Slayers Among Us. Lessons for today. The story of David and Goliath is more than just an ancient tale. It is a timeless lesson. It speaks to us today. It reminds us that giants are not always what they seem. Their great strength can also be their great weakness. Goliath was huge. He was heavily armored. This made him slow. It made him ponderous. His perceived advantages also created vulnerabilities that David, with his different skill set, could exploit. What looked like an overwhelming mismatch was, in fact, a different kind of contest altogether. David's victory teaches us about the power of the underdog. It shows us that courage is not the absence of fear. It is acting in spite of fear. David must have felt some apprehension, but his faith was greater than his fear. He saw the situation differently. He did not focus on Goliath's size. He focused on God's power. He chose to fight on his own terms, using his own unique strengths, his speed, his accuracy with the sling, his unwavering belief. He did not try to play Goliath's game. We all face giants in our lives. They may not be 9-foot warriors. They may be difficult challenges. They may be overwhelming odds. They may be powerful institutions or daunting tasks. The lesson from David is to reevaluate these giants. What are their supposed strengths, and what are their hidden weaknesses? What are our own unconventional strengths that we might overlook? Sometimes the very things that make us different, the things that don't fit the traditional mold, are our greatest assets when confronting our Goliaths. The story encourages us to find our smooth stones. These are our unique talents, our experiences, our faith, our unconventional approaches. It tells us not to be intimidated by the armor of the world, the conventional wisdom, the expectations, the established ways of doing things. True strength often comes from unexpected places. David's courage was born in lonely pastures, protecting sheep. His victory reminds us that with faith, with ingenuity, and with the courage to be ourselves, even the smallest among us can overcome the greatest of giants.